Every single day across the United States, hundreds of homicide files are quietly moved from the active, brightly lit desks of detectives into the cold, silent steel cabinets of the police archives. When a brutal crime occurs, it detonates like a bomb inside a community. The headlines scream in bold black ink, the local television broadcasts flash with red and blue lights, and the public demands immediate, absolute justice. But as the weeks turn into months and the months bleed into decades, the public attention inevitably drifts away. The news cycles refresh, the yellow crime scene tape is torn down, and the agonizing noise of the investigation fades into a suffocating, permanent silence. What remains are the cardboard boxes. Boxes locked in climate-controlled subterranean warehouses filled with yellowed index cards, grainy black and white crime scene photographs, and physical evidence wrapped in plastic bags that haven't been touched in over 50 years. The files we are pulling from the vault today are not the famous overanalyzed serial killer cases that dominate popular media. These are the mysteries that made a nation hold its breath, only to vanish entirely from the public consciousness, leaving behind families who are still waiting for answers in the dark. These are the crimes where the truth is stranger and significantly darker than any Hollywood fiction. This is the raw telemetry of 5 forgotten murder cases that still haunt America. Welcome back to the Wayne Archive, the digital vault where we tear away the redaction tape and shine a cold, hard light on the cases the legal system tried to bury. In the annals of American true crime, names like Bundy and the Zodiac dominate the cultural landscape. But the true terror of the American justice system doesn't lie within the files of the famous incarcerated predators. The true terror lies within the cases that were never solved, never closed, and eventually completely abandoned by the authorities. When a killer escapes justice, the crime doesn't end. It remains suspended in time, poisoning the town, the surviving family, and the very ground where the blood was spilled. Today, we are stepping into the dark heart of America's unsolved ledger. We are going to analyze crime scene telemetry, dissect corrupted police files, and examine the highly unsettling data of 5 cases that should have been front-page news for years, but instead became permanent ghosts in the machine. Lock your doors, pull the blinds, and let's look at the evidence they locked away. We begin our descent by completely shattering the illusion of the pristine, mid-century American suburb. In the fall of 1966, the Bridgetown neighborhood of Cincinnati, Ohio, was the absolute physical manifestation of the American dream. It was a community of manicured lawns, unlocked front doors, and quiet, heavily insulated wealth. But on the evening of September 27th, that sanctuary was violated in the most brutal, calculated manner imaginable. Case 1. The Bricca family execution, 1966. Jerry Bricca was a highly successful chemical engineer. His wife, Linda, was a former flight attendant, and they lived in a quiet cul-de-sac with their 4-year-old daughter, Debbie. When Jerry failed to show up for work and the family's trash cans remained at the curb for days, neighbors contacted the local police. When officers breached the front door of the Bricca residence, they walked into a scene of highly organized clinical slaughter. The entire family had been systematically bound, gagged, and executed with a bladed weapon in the master bedroom. But what terrified the homicide detectives was not just the violence. It was the absolute, chilling lack of physical chaos. There was no sign of forced entry. The doors were locked from the inside. There was no robbery. Wallets filled with cash and expensive jewelry were left sitting in plain sight on the dressers. The killer had operated with terrifying psychological control. He had taken the time to carefully wash his hands in the master bathroom sink, leaving behind a perfectly folded, damp towel. He had even secured the family's dogs in the basement before beginning the executions. The telemetry of the crime scene suggested the victims intimately knew their killer. The Hamilton County Police immediately focused their crosshairs on a prime suspect, a local, highly prominent veterinarian who had allegedly been engaged in a volatile, deeply secretive affair with Linda Bricca. The circumstantial evidence against him was massive. He had no alibi for the night of the murders. He had abruptly hired a team of high-powered defense attorneys before the police even questioned him, and behavioral analysts noted that securing barking dogs before committing a violent act is a classic psychological signature of someone who works with animals professionally. But this is where the justice system completely collapsed. Because the suspect was highly connected within the elite social circles of Cincinnati, the investigation hit an impenetrable wall of bureaucratic silence. The grand jury refused to indict him based on circumstantial evidence. Over the following decades, the physical evidence collected from the Bricka home, the damp towel, the ropes, the forensic swabs, mysteriously vanished from the police evidence lockers. The case was quietly pushed into the archives, effectively shielding the suspect until his natural death in 2004. The Bricka execution remains one of the most chilling examples of how wealth and local power can completely erase a triple homicide from the public record. Case 2. The Chicago Movie Theater Phantoms, 1956. From the manicured lawns of Ohio, we shift to the freezing, neon-lit concrete of Chicago in the winter of 1956. This is the case of the Grimes sisters, an investigation that triggered one of the most massive, desperate manhunts in the history of the Midwest, only to end in a forensic cover-up that still defies modern medical logic. On the evening of December 28th, 15-year-old Barbara Grimes and her 12-year-old sister Patricia left their home on the south side of Chicago to see an Elvis Presley double feature at the local Brighton Theater. They were seen standing in the popcorn line at 9:30 p.m. After the theater lights went down, they vanished entirely from the face of the earth. The Chicago Police Department initially dismissed the disappearance as a standard runaway case, but as the days dragged on and temperatures plunged below zero, the reality of the situation set in. Thousands of police officers and federal agents scoured the frozen city. It wasn't until January 22nd, nearly a month later, that a construction worker driving down a desolate, snow-covered access road known as Devil's Creek spotted the naked, frozen bodies of Barbara and Patricia Grimes dumped haphazardly behind a guardrail. The true horror of the Grimes case lies within the walls of the Cook County Coroner's Office. The official autopsy results released to the public were mathematically and biologically absurd. Despite heavy, obvious post-mortem bruising, puncture wounds, and the fact that the girls had been stripped entirely naked in the dead of winter, the coroner officially ruled that there was no evidence of foul play. The official cause of death was listed as secondary shock caused by exposure to the freezing temperatures. Independent pathologists were completely outraged. The stomach contents of the girls contained the exact meal they had eaten before leaving for the theater, proving via gastric emptying rates that they had been murdered within hours of vanishing. The physical telemetry proved they were kept somewhere indoors, executed, and then dumped on the roadside weeks later. Yet, the city of Chicago, desperate to close a highly publicized, terrifying case, pushed the exposure narrative. The actual predators who abducted 2 children from a crowded urban street, held them in secret, and executed them were never identified. The Grimes sisters were buried, the heavily flawed autopsy report was locked in a filing cabinet, and the police quietly stopped looking. Case 3. The Osprey Orange Grove. Annihilation, 1959. We leave the urban centers and step into the humid, isolated agricultural belts of the Deep South. In December 1959, the Walker family, Cliff, Christine, 3-year-old Jimmy, and 5-week-old Debbie, lived in a modest ranch house surrounded by sprawling orange groves in Osprey, Florida. When a friend arrived to help Cliff with his cattle on the morning of December 20th, he walked into a massacre. The entire family had been systematically executed with a .22 caliber firearm. The killer had spent a deeply unsettling amount of time inside the house after the murders. A bloody footprint from a size 9 work boot was stamped into the hardwood. A single, dark hair was recovered from Christine's body. On the kitchen counter sat a half-eaten box of chocolates that did not belong to the family. The FBI launched a massive manhunt, running ballistics on hundreds of firearms across the Florida agricultural corridors. The psychological profile took a terrifying turn when detectives realized that Dick Hickok and Perry Smith, the infamous drifters who had executed the Clutter family in Kansas just a month prior, immortalized in the book In Cold Blood, were actively driving a stolen vehicle through that exact Florida county on the night of the Walker murders. Telemetry data placed them at a motel just miles from the ranch. Yet, under polygraph interrogation, the results were inconclusive. Decades later, in 2012, law enforcement exhumed the bodies of Hickok and Smith from their graves in Kansas to extract DNA to compare against the semen and hair found at the Walker crime scene. But decades of poor storage conditions had completely degraded the evidence. The DNA profiles were mathematically corrupted and unusable. The case remains open, a frozen piece of 1950s horror where the true identity of the monster who wiped out an entire family is permanently lost to the damp Florida air. Case 4. The 3X Killer, 1930. The architecture of unidentified killers becomes even more clinical when we examine the 3X Killer, who stalked the dark industrial waterfronts of New York in the summer of 1930. This predator did not hide in the shadows. He actively communicated with the police and the press, leaving a series of typed, highly complex letters signed with a bizarre geometric symbol resembling 3 intersecting letter X's. The letters claimed that the killer was operating as part of a highly classified international secret society dedicated to executing specific individuals who had violated a hidden code of conduct. The physical evidence was exceptionally cold. The 3X Killer utilized a rare foreign-made automatic pistol that fired ammunition manufactured exclusively in Europe. He would strike his victims in broad daylight, slipping through the crowded streets of Queens without a single witness being able to provide a definitive description of his face. His letters to the police contained accurate, unredacted details about the crime scenes that only the killer could have known, proving that he was actively watching the police investigations from the crowd. FBI behavioral analysts spent decades reviewing the typed typography of the 3X letters, concluding that the killer possessed an advanced technical background, likely an engineer or a former military intelligence officer who utilized the chaos of the Great Depression to execute a highly private, deeply calculated vendetta. Then, just as suddenly as the terror began, the letters ceased. The 3X Killer vanished entirely from the New York landscape, the ink fading on the letters of a monster who treated the streets of New York as his personal chessboard. Case 5. The Route 29. Stalker, 1996. Our final case shifts to the modern era, proving that the digital age cannot protect you from a highly organized predator. In the spring of 1996, an invisible, highly methodical serial predator turned a 100-mile stretch of U.S. Route 29 in Virginia into a private hunting ground. His modus operandi was brilliantly simple and entirely terrifying. He would target young women driving alone. He would pull his vehicle alongside theirs on the highway, frantically waving and pointing at the undercarriage of their car, convincing them that they had a severe mechanical issue, sparks flying or a flat tire. When the terrified women pulled over to the shoulder, the stalker would pull up behind them. He presented himself as a friendly, helpful mechanic, offering them a ride to a nearby payphone or gas station. Between March and May of 1996, over 20 different women reported this exact terrifying encounter to the Virginia State Police. Many of them refused his offer and drove away. But on March 2nd, 25-year-old Alicia Showalter Reynolds, a graduate student from Baltimore, pulled over. She was seen by passing motorists getting into the passenger seat of a dark-colored pickup truck. She was never seen alive again. 2 months later, her skeletal remains were discovered hidden deep in a densely wooded area off the highway. The Virginia State Police possessed an incredibly detailed physical description of the suspect from the surviving women. A white male, late 30s to early 40s, with light brown hair, possessing an intimate knowledge of automotive mechanics. They had a description of his vehicle. They had the exact psychological signature of his trap. Yet, despite thousands of tips and one of the largest dragnets in the history of the state, the Route 29 stalker was never identified. Following the discovery of Alicia's body, the attempted highway stops abruptly and permanently ceased. Behavioral analysts suspect the killer either was incarcerated for an unrelated crime, moved his hunting grounds to a different state, or simply blended back into society, completely satisfied with his kill. He remains a phantom on the asphalt, A horrifying reminder that the most dangerous predators don't break into your house. They simply wave at you from the next lane over. When we review these 5 cold, static-filled files from the depths of the American ledger, we are forced to confront a deeply unsettling truth about our society. We look at the heavy brick police stations, the sprawling federal DNA databases, and the surveillance cameras on every corner, and we operate under the comforting illusion that the truth always surfaces, that justice is an absolute, inevitable mathematical equation. But the raw, unredacted data of the archive proves that this is a lie. Justice is incredibly fragile. It can be completely derailed by a corrupt social circle, a politically motivated coroner, a drop of rain on a crime scene, or a decade of poor storage conditions in a police warehouse. The monsters who walked through the suburbs of Ohio, the orange groves of Florida, and the highways of Virginia did not vanish into thin air because they were supernatural ghosts. They vanished because they understood exactly how to exploit the cracks in our human systems. They lived out their lives, watched the news reports fade, and died in comfortable beds, leaving behind nothing but cardboard boxes filled with unreadable data. If this deep dive into the suppressed and forgotten files of American history made you look closer at the locked doors of your own home, hit that subscribe button and join us here at the Wayne Archive. We continue to pull the heavy boxes out of the dark, decode the corrupted telemetry, and fight for the names that the world tried to forget. Review the evidence, analyze the impossible geometry of these cold cases, and drop a number in the comments section below to tell me which of these 5 cases disturbed your psychological profile the most. Thank you for stepping into the vault with us today. And remember, just because a file is closed doesn't mean the shadow has left the room.